Alright, let's see if we can learn how to get started with Jenkins Continuous Integration Server with PHP application. Um, it seems that the hardest part to getting started with Jenkins is kind of just wrapping your head around it, at least it was for me. So I'm going to use this post at getphp.com. It's just a get a Jenkins CI server for PHP fast with Vagrant. And in order for you to follow along, you'll just need git VirtualBox and Vagrant, which you can find right here on these posts. I'm going to use the Jenkins PHP Vagrant script found on GitHub here, and we're going to use this just to kickstart a quick virtual machine running Jenkins that should be equipped with most of the tools that we need to get started. So, alright. We're just going to clone this down and then simply Vagrant up. Now this takes quite a while. Since I destroyed the VM last time I was using it, this is going to take, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes to actually get started the first time. After you have the machine downloaded and started and configured for the first time, you brought it up for the first time. After that, you can just Vagrant halt and Vagrant up again, and it just takes, you know, a minute, a brief moment. So on top of this, we're going to need an application to work with. So I have absolutely senseless FizzBuzz application that I made for this, to demo this. I made it a while back, like 8 months ago, but I never actually finished this tutorial, so that's what I'm here to do today. So this isn't quite perfect, but it definitely works, and I apologize for the audio quality. My computer's going to start its fan regime to cool it back down, because apparently it doesn't like spinning up a virtual machine that much. Alright, while that's going, cover some of my flawed conventions, or possibly flawed conventions. Every project that I work with now, or that I create, I have a few very common files, and they're listed here. The build folder, which I use to hold the artifacts of each build, you know, the log files, the reports, so on. The source folder will hold all the actual source code. Test folder for PHP unit tests, or just tests in general, but I guess I've used PHP unit a while, so it seems the easiest to just throw that PHP in front of unit test, PHP unit test. Git ignore file, license file, readme file, and the ant build file. I was going to type the ant build file up, or create it as we worked here, but since I'd already started with one, I might as well just continue with that and explain how it works. With Jenkins, essentially, the focus is that it ties tools together so that you can build your entire application. I mean, it's crazy how much it takes to actually build an application. You got to use Composer to pull in all your dependencies, and then maybe even I know on the major projects I'm working on now, I have to on my build environment, I have to have Ruby installed so that I can use Bundler and grab some gems to use Middleman to automatically transpile my CoffeeScript and JavaScript and minify this, and I need Node so I can have Bower to grab all the front-end dependencies, and then of course, well, I think Middleman sparks up the Sass compiling of the CSS style sheets, and then I mean, the list just goes on, and then when you deploy, you have to restart the servers that are communicating with Rabbit, and it's just nuts, the amount of stuff that, the amount of moving parts and pieces to deploying an application. So once you learn Jenkins, it's amazing how much simpler and how quickly you can deploy. Now, for most of the projects that I'm working on, every time I make a commit, more specifically, every time I merge a pull request, I deploy the application, and it makes it very simple. I mean, all you got to do is just go look at it here. Let's see here. This is going. All right. So while that's still building, let's go ahead and I cloned down the FizzBuzz application that I created. Let's just go ahead and take a look at that. In the tests folder, I have my PHP unit configuration file. In the source folder, I have my FizzBuzz application. In the build folder, well, actually, I just built this, so it has a ton of stuff, but I can actually take all these folders and delete them because they don't, that's the product of creating this. Now, if you want to make life a little bit easier while you're learning Jenkins, it's convenient to install all the tools that you will have Jenkins use on your local environment. So if you want your Jenkins server to run your PHP unit test, it's convenient if you already have that on your development environment so that you can just run PHP unit, or my configuration files in here. So then it runs it, builds the reports, and goes. So if we're just working on this piece by piece, we'll be able to more efficiently, effectively, with less stress, get to the end product. And especially having Ant. If you have Ant installed on your development environment, you can use your Ant build file to run build targets. So I have a build target of lint, just to lint check all the files. Build failed. Lint does not exist in Project FizzBuzz. So let's take a look at our build file. So our build file consists of the project name, which in this case is FizzBuzz. The default target is test. So I can just run ant test, and it will run the default target. Because I'm using build.xml, which is the default build file name for Ant, we can move our file somewhere else and call it up specifically. So we can see here that this is the target name. When I ran test, the target test, which is, I believe, the default target. So if I were just to run Ant alone, it would run the clean test, or not clean test, the clean target, which would delete any folders that needed to be deleted. It would run the prepare target, which will create the folders again. These are just artifact folders, logs, coverage reports. And then it'll run lint on all the files. You can have it only run lint on the changed files if you like. It's pretty easy to do. Just add a modified attribute to your build XML file under the file set. Is that attribute? I'm not sure. Anyway, then it runs PHP unit configuration. Then it's done. So our primary one is test. So let's find target name test. Test. You'll see it depends on prepare, lint, and then it runs PHP unit. So it's going to run the prepare target, as you saw. Prepare depends on clean, so then before running prepare, it'll run the clean, prepare, then lint, which is right down here. And for the lint, since this is an Ant configuration file, we're going to have Ant run the executable of PHP with the argument of -l, and we're going to run it every time that we find a file in these two directories with a file name of .php. And then, of course, if lint fails, the build fails. We don't want the build to go through if lint checking fails. And then after lint, it runs PHP unit. And in this case, PHP unit, using Ant, we execute the executable of just simply PHP unit. We have it installed globally on our system. And then we have it fail on error. Obviously, we don't want our builds to be deployed or anything like that, or to consider them passing builds if the unit tests fail. And then I pass an argument to PHP unit so that it knows where its configuration file is. And then that's all there is for the test. We also have a report target, which does everything in test first. So it runs test, and then it'll run PHP loc, or LOC, lines of code, I guess, PHP code sniffer, pdepend or PHP mess detector, and PHP mess detector, PHP copy paste detector, and PHP docs. And all of those are individual targets in my build file. We'll go through these real quick while this is still building. Again, the first time is the longest time it takes to get this virtual machine up. So for reports, it's going to run test. We just saw that. Then it's going to run PHP LOC, measure project size, and it's going to output the data for that into the logs folder. It's going to run PHP CS. The report, there's going to output a check style report, which is an XML file, and the standard can be found in this configuration file, PHP CS rule set. I go over there, and the base rule set. Oh no, this is PHP MD rule set. This is PHP CS rule set. And I have the rule defined as pair. I used to code to pair standard, but I changed it to PSR2, so this is actually going to have a ton of errors. Well, not a ton, a few errors. And then when I commit these changes, having changed it to PSR2, it will clean those errors up, but we'll save that change until after we're running here. Then pdepend, of course, the configuration file. Again, where is it? No, phpmd is the configuration file. phpmd rule set. So going back up to pdepend, we have that output a ton of logs, and even our fancy little charts, our dependencies SVG, and the overview pyramid SVG are files that little graphics that show a visual representation of the results there. PHP mess detector, this is our rule set. Again, we just glanced at the rule set, and then it'll output the report file pmd.xml. We'll configure all these in Jenkins to turn these report files into easy to read consumable material. PHP copy paste detector for finding duplicate code using PHP copy paste detector. And then again, this outputs a log file, and the path that we're going to run our copy paste detector is against the source folder. And then PHP docs, which has its own configuration file in the build folder. So we'll glance at that. There's nothing under package or deploy, since we don't really need that in this senselessly simple application. But packaging the application would consist of, well, I usually just compress all the files that are to be deployed to a server, and then consider it packaged. It is ready to go. Then the deploy usually consists of, or at least in the conventions that I use, it consists of connecting to these servers that it wants to deploy to, whether it's staging multiple development servers or production, then extracting the packaged file into its own unique release folder, kind of like how Capistrano does it, and then symlinking all the configuration files and log folders, then changing the symlink that is pointing to the root directory of the web server to the new root directory running. Then, of course, stopping and starting any necessary services like our message consumers and so on and so forth. So that's that there. Oh, packaging might also include, I'm not sure where it would fit in here since there's no actual style stuff, but packaging or building your package, building your release might also include generating your front end, well, either compressing, minifying all of your front end code. So there we go. This last bit of red, the sea of red, as it's been said in the regular documentation or the notes that you'll read when you use phpet.com configuration files. But this last sea of red here is just simply downloading a few FAR files and then moving them into user local bins so that they can be globally available for running. So I'm going to vagrant SSH into this, and since it's up, we can go to my computer. There we go. 10, 11, 12, 13. forwards us to the port 8080, which is what Jenkins runs on default. This Jenkins has absolutely no security in place, but we're going to go ahead and create a new freestyle job or project. Of course, if you're going to use Jenkins in public space where multiple individuals have access to it, you're going to want to set up security and so on, but that is not really the focus of this particular tutorial. So we're going to create a freestyle project called FizzBuzz. In this project, we're going... Oh, it doesn't look like it installed all the plugins that I wanted installed, because Git is supposed to be installed in here. So can't type. Need to find exec once. There we go. And I want to... Not sure if I have to run this as root or not, but I don't think so. Oh yeah, I do. Oops. Yeah, so... This is just a simple way to get all the plugins installed. If I wanted to, I could just go to back to my dashboard, manage Jenkins, and then manage plugins. We want to update all these plugins and see some new available ones, but we'll let this install it. This should fire up, actually, when you Vagrant up. I'll see why it didn't do that and then fix that before anybody else can get a hold of it. So it's installing all the plugins. It's in this shell file. And this is in the Jenkins PHP Vagrant repo. Yeah, these are all useful. Build pipeline plugin is very pretty, convenient for having staged builds. You know, you want to test, then you want to reports, then you want to deploy to staging, then you want to deploy to. All right, so that's good. Now, if we go back to my dashboard, Jenkins restarting. Oof, my computer is hot. Here we go. So back to our FizzBuzz app, our FizzBuzz job. And I'm going to go back to configuring it. So now we have the Git source code management source, and I'm just going to put in the HTTPS URL to pull the FizzBuzz. There's a detail you have to do at the command line to pull in the host keys for like GitHub or Bitbucket or any host that you're pulling from using the SSH plugins in Jenkins. So I'm just going to get around that by using the HTTPS. And the build triggers, we're going to have it build the master branch. We're going to pull the source code management resource every 5 minutes. And these little question marks totally help. You can learn how to use all these resources just by clicking these question marks if you need to work on that. Now I'm not going to add any build steps. I'm just going to save this first and build it. Obviously it's not going to do anything except for populate our workspace and start us off with a nice blue circle, build successful, because there was nothing to build. So I'm going to go back to the project, go to the workspace, and you'll see all the files are in the workspace. That's fantastic. So now that just means the connectivity with our Git repos functional, although you will see a large red error underneath the repository URL if you don't have the correct connectivity, if you don't have the correct credentials or URL access, so on and so forth. I'm going to add a build step, and I'm just going to simply invoke ant. And in this, I'm just going to use the test target. And by default, if you remember, we have in our build file, the default is test, so you don't actually have to type this. You don't have to put this in here. I'm just going to put it in there anyway. Now, let's save this and just force it to build. And here's our second build. We'll go to the console output and see what it's doing. It's preparing, clean prepare lint, PHP unit could not read tests, PHP unit.xml. Well, let's go back to our workspace and what? Oops, not the dashboard. Yeah. A failing test. There's a space in front of that. That's interesting. So let's go here. PHP unit C, and then let's just add base directory. That should work now. Let's just send this back to the server, build.xml. Let's see. Let's just commit and push that. We'll just hope it's right. Yes, right. And of course, if I want to, I'll just go over here and run ant. PHP unit runs fine here, so let's go back to the previous build, or actually go back to our project and build now. Since we have it polling the server, the Git repo every 5 minutes, it should let's go and see. Oh, it just can't read it apparently. So now I'm going to go into what, varlib Jenkins jobs, fizzbuzz job, fizzbuzz. Oh. Go into the workspace and just ant. Oh. Got to switch over to be the Jenkins user. So could not read. So well, it can read it. It just doesn't want to. Yeah, well, let's get around this in an inappropriate way by just taking the PHP unit folder, putting it up a directory. It will be able to read it here. And then tests, I believe, will be the folder. Bootstrap file will be in tests. So now, ant PHP unit. Oh, nope, got to change the actual build file too. Boom. So, PHP unit, where is it? Tests. Actually, we don't need to tell it where the configuration file is because PHP unit should be able to run right out of this directory now. There we go. And then ant PHP unit. Oh. Ant target names are case sensitive. Alright, so this worked. Now, let's commit these changes up. So, boom, boom. Moved PHP unit configuration. So, boom. There we go. Fantastic. Back to the project, build it again. Passing, that's great. Okay, so it did the lint, the clean prepare lint, PHP unit ran fine, great. So we've got our initial one passing. So we should have called this one project fizzbuzz tests or something like that. So I'm going to go back to the dashboard and I'm going to create a new item called fizzbuzz reports, and copy this from fizzbuzz. So we're just duplicating an existing project. Alright, so then it'll have the Git repo and everything like that. Now, but instead, I'm not going to just do test, I'm going to do report, I believe. Yeah, just report, which will run the test. And then once it's done reporting, alright, now I'm going to go back to the dashboard, go back to my fizzbuzz, and I'm going to configure this to have a post-build trigger, add post-build actions. I'm going to have a post-build trigger of building the other project, fizzbuzz reports. So once this project builds successfully, it's going to run the reports on the files. Now, let's see. Oh, fizzbuzz reports hasn't run yet, so let's just build this one now and watch it build. See if it builds. So prepare lint PHP unit, PHP lines of code ran, PHP CS ran, pdepend running, PHPMD, PHP copy paste detector, PHP docs. Oh, dash F build. So there's an error there, but this won't. This doesn't care if PHP docs fails. So, but let's take a look here. Oh, yeah, here. So F is one argument. And then the next argument's going to... That's probably what was wrong with the PHP unit, is I didn't pass it one argument, let it go a space, and then pass the next piece of the argument. We'll see if that makes a difference. But now, okay, commit and push. What? Commit. There we go. Oh, I must have. Alright. These are all errors. It's trying to give me errors here, but PHP Storm apparently doesn't read these ant build files very well, or doesn't understand them completely. So either way, this is a successful build. So now, if we go back and look at our FizzBuzz Reports workspace, we will find that the build folder has a ton of content. So we've got all of our logs, which is going to have the check style, jdepend, php log, pmd copy paste detector. We're going to have our coverage. We should have had our coverage reports from PHP unit running. Well, you should have our API if PHP docs was running correctly. We have our pdepend graphics. So, and then our pdepend overview pyramid. And we can actually put these on the dashboard of, not the dashboard, on the home page, if you will, of this particular project. But so now let's go back and configure this project. Because this is the reporting, so obviously we want it to publish the reports. So let's just publish a check style analysis, which will be in build logs check style. Yeah, there we go. I didn't want to hit enter. All right. And then we wanted to, let's see what else we got here. This is do all that we can. Publish PMD analysis results, which is going to be build logs PMD, I believe. Yep. And all this stuff you can find, all these files, you can find them in their individual configurations. So if I'm looking at build.xml, I can see that PHP is creating this check style XML file as a report. I can see that pdepend is producing these overview graphics, and then jdepend XML file, and so on. So if you're looking where to find these files, you can either glance in the workspace folder after building the project for the first time, or you can look in your configuration file. So publish duplicate code analysis, that will be logs, oops, yeah, copy paste detector, duplicate code, that sounds right. Oh, every time you hit enter when you're selecting, oh, it already produced our check style warnings. Must have automatically ran build based on the fact that the repo had changed. So anyway, and it'll tell you if these files don't exist. Let's just keep adding more post-build actions. So we want to, might as well publish the Clover reports, huh? Build Clover. How come you don't click enter? All right. And then what? I think I have a JUnit file. This is nonsensical, but the whole app doesn't seem sensible. Test report XML. Build logs JUnit.xml. Let's go take a look at our FizzBuzz. Nope, our configuration file for PHP unit. And this will be, yeah, build logs JUnit.xml. Oh, shoot. I need to fix this. Because this configuration file is no longer in the right place. So the PHP unit configuration file is not going to actually put these things where they're supposed to be. So save this. And go back. Let's just commit these changes. PHP unit. Build log. There we go. Commit push. Push. There we go. So, and it says it's not there right now, but let's just trust that it will be. So build logs Clover, and then we'll publish an HTML report. Let's see here. Actually, let's just skip this HTML report thing for right now and save this. And while we're at this. So we've got this one built twice. I'm going to go back to the dashboard. You'll see that we have FizzBuzz and FizzBuzz reports. So let's do let's change this up so that it looks cooler anyway, and build a pipeline view and call this FizzBuzz pipeline. Now, since we went back and we made the primary FizzBuzz the tests project or an item, whatever they call them here, automatically fire up another build. We want to have that as our initial job, the primary one, the tests one. We're going to call this FizzBuzz pipeline view. Our layout is going to be based on the upstream-downstream relationships. We want to always allow manual triggers just for fun. And Lightbox works for displaying the console output. And apply. So now, if we click OK, we'll have a new view. So we have the pipeline view. So if we were to just run this, boom. You know what? I want to manage. Nope. Yeah, I want to configure this view and have it show at least 3 builds back, so we can see how many times we fail and win. Alright, so we didn't have this running 4 views there at number 4, I don't believe. So, and you can see that it just finished up running the 6th FizzBuzz project, or building it the 6th time, and it built the FizzBuzz reports for the 3rd time. So if we go to the FizzBuzz reports result, we have our check style warnings for this particular build. We have our PMD warnings. We have our Clover summary reports for our test coverage. And if we go back up to the project, we will have all this stuff reported out. So it shows that I have, on my check style report, it shows that I have 18 issues, and I'm going to go ahead and fix some of these so you can see this trend go down. We have access to our Clover summary report. And I'm going to go to the workspace here, and we should now have in our build folder, API, PHP docs, I believe. Yeah, so we have our PHP docs folder, and which has all of our, oh, those are classes, XML file. That's PHP docs XML file. We want the API folder and classes, I believe. There we go. This is an HTML output of that, the PHP docs compile result of this. So I don't know why the styling's not there, but now we have our classes. Why isn't this going? The output is kind of failing me here. But either way, this is like this is PHP docs. It's just not producing a very understandable HTML output at the moment. And then the XML for that is all in the PHP docs here. So I'm going to go to here, and then we're going to have our workspace file, the SVG showing the instability. We want to add that to our workspace. I'm going to go back to FizzBuzz reports and add a description. This says it's escaped HTML, so I'm just going to FizzBuzz reports workspace build p2bend, and then what was the other one? There was something else. Build p2bend overview pyramid is what it was. There we go. Now I'm going to submit this. So it'll show these two, but since it's not, it's using escaped HTML, so let's just manage Jenkins. Configure global security, I believe. And use raw HTML in our descriptions. So save that. Go back to Jenkins, go back to our FizzBuzz reports, and we should have our SVGs of the PHP p2bend results, the graphics that have been produced. We still have our check style trend and our code coverage. Our code coverage summary has been produced so that we can use that again. FizzBuzz, And it shows us all this beautiful check style warnings and so on and so forth. Now I'm going to glance at the check style warnings and see if I can't fix some of these and show you how this drops. So FizzBuzz line 12, incomplete license. Why? Oh, I was supposed to change this to PSR2. Okay, so this is the PHP CS code style rule set, and we're changing it to PSR2. Push this up and go back to our projects. Actually, I'm just going to go back to the home page, go back to our pipeline, and build our pipeline again. Okay, done with the tests. That passed. If the test failed, it wouldn't do the it wouldn't run the reports. And you can chain up a ton of these. They can be in any series. You can have them running the pipeline builds, showing parallel runs, all kinds of awesome stuff. So anyway, now we are on watching build number 4. I'm going to go back to the project, and we'll see that our check style trend since build number 3 to build number 4 dropped down to, what, 2? Looks like we've got 2 errors there. And I'm going to guess that their namespace requirements, because this is an older project. Before I started following PSR2, I actually had it running pair 2, so it didn't require anything to be in a namespace, which is a fun switch. But then, oh, here's an end of new line. 0 found, so FizzBuzz up PHP line 103, we're supposed to go here. Oh yeah, there's supposed to be 1 space at the end, and then alright, something dumb. Push these changes up. And just for the fun of it, back to the project, back to our home page, see the whole pipeline. You don't actually have to see this. You can watch these individual projects, see how they're rolling on their own. You can fire them off like this. I'm going to fire off the project from here, schedule to build, and then if I go view the pipeline, it'll show that the build is running. It's convenient. It's really nice. You can check out the history, see where and when builds have failed, why, broken since this build. This is just a wonderful tool, and this is really all you need to get started. I mean, I suppose I could just continue going on babbling, but you don't need that. So now the reports show that nothing about PHP-MD really has changed. I fixed one check style trend. There's a whole one PMD is else is never necessary, and you can simplify the code. Right. So oops. There we go. So that should work. Yep, did. So boom, boom. Awesome. So I'm pushing this back up. Obviously, this isn't following any kind of Git flow of any sort, but it shows you how Jenkins works, and I probably wasted enough of your time here. And of course, if I just wanted to run the reports, I could just run the reports by itself. So it's scheduled this run. And FizzBuzz reports. There we go. PMD trend down to none. So, and that's, I guess, the ideal situation. You want to just always, I know that working with a lot of developers, or a few developers, my team, we always have to have this check style trend going down. If we've absorbed a new project, the focus is, of course, to clean it without breaking it. Test result trend. And that's it. I mean, this is fully functional. This is as functional as you want it. Don't be afraid to go in and configure the crap out of Jenkins to make it do anything that you'd like. I kind of stick to putting as much as I possibly can in the ant build script. I also like to, as you've seen on the template for Jenkins jobs here, the individual that created this has a PHP lines of code for the continuous integration server, and then a PHP LOC for running it on the command line. So you can just simply go to ant, and instead of this one, instead of typing like PHP unit or whatever, you can just ant PHP unit or ant lint, and use ant in your local development environment to run these. I know that I personally use ant on some of our larger projects to pull all the tools required to build the front-end madness together, compressing the JavaScript and transpiling the CSS. I don't really mess with CoffeeScript, but it's in there in a few places. So, and ant can do all of that. All you have to do is just make sure that the resources are installed on the server that you're preparing for using ant. You should be able to just go on and at the command line run PHP. Well, PHP CS is a bad one unless you do version. Or run PHP unit. You should be able to have all of the correct PHP version running on your environment. This is the Jenkins PHP Vagrant virtual machine, so it's just running whatever 5.5.2. It's really enough, but well, not really. It should be running a newer version. That's it. That is it. I'm done. We'll cover some more cool stuff later. In the meantime, just have fun with your pipeline build, and then whenever you want, just trigger these up. You can always restart them, see what's going on. It's a fantastic tool. Jenkins is just amazing. I hope you find this useful.